Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. I'm talking to my friend Magatte Wade. She has a message for the incoming Trump administration. It's not about paternalism. It's not about foreign aid. It's about supporting prosperity and entrepreneurship and economic growth. Check it out. Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Magatte, how's it going?
I'm very well, Matt. How are you?
I'm good.
Always good to see you.
We're in New York City for the Atlas Network's annual Freedom Dinner. And you are still intimately involved with Atlas, making sure that Africa chooses a path of free markets and prosperity.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Correct. You got it.
But I'm going to push on the spot, and I want your hot take on the election. Are you optimistic or pessimistic after the election? Do you think we can actually start having reasonable conversations again, or is it just going to get worse?
Reasonable conversations and the identity politics madness, I'm not sure. I don't know. I will reserve judgment until for the next few months, after we see what happens in the next few months and how people seem to react to it. But as you know, for somebody who has been shouting from the rooftops that regulations are a big problem, you can only imagine how excited I am to at least have in there people who are talking about regulations and the need to slash them and put the conditions in place for people to build, more prosperity as well as bigger innovation. So from that standpoint, I'm excited that the people who are here are talking about, addressing those concerns.
What do you think if you were given a blank check to advise the Trump administration on how to deal with developing countries and even it's this question of mass migration, which very much drove the conversation in American politics, but I think it's driving the conversation in a lot of places. What would you tell them to do that would help and not hurt?
Yes. I mean, in this case, to me, it's very simple. It's if we want America, any of the Western nations that happen to also be wealthy nations. In general, when we talk about the West, we think about the wealthier nations among us. Of course, there's Asia, but if we want for immigration and to get under control, we have no choice but to make sure that we help other nations also become wealthy. Because as long as you're going to have nations that are, wealthy to the point, and it's not about the difference between, let's say, it's not so much the difference. Well, maybe you can edit that out because if I go there, it's going to be confusing. But let me go back. So if you have nations that are this in GDP, quite wealthy, and then others that are way here, as long as you're going to have that gap, the people who are over here, especially if they don't have the possibilities to build up from where they are, they're going to migrate away. Like this nation was built on. This nation was built because some folks said, hey, primarily Europeans, they're not happy with what the circumstances were in Europe. And they seeked out new horizons, came here, and the rest of history. So humans will continue migrating from less okay places to better places in search for a better life. It's just what we humans do. And nothing and no one is ever going to be able to change that. So even with the immigration, measures that they're talking about taking, first of all, when it comes to this mass deportation, I know it's something that they're all very excited about, and it looks like people voted, to have happen. I would like to caution that if it was me at least, some people are already here. These people are already here. Maybe let's see if we can do a little triage, find out who are perfectly fine, decent people. Yes, they came here under circumstances that might not have been, legal. But if the background check doesn't show anything crazy, then give them a chance maybe to participate here. And everybody else, maybe those are the ones that you try to send back. If they're criminals or anything like that, you can send them back. But ideally, I would have loved for them I would love for them to do this in a very thoughtful manner. And if it was me, for example, I would not have done mass deportations, because some people are already here, and yes, they came under, illegal premises. That's not good. We know that. But I think sending them back if they're otherwise okay people, it's weird. And no matter how they do this, I really hope that they do it with thoughtfulness and as humanely as possible. And but going forward, I understand nations wanting to have their immigration borders. I have different views on that, but I can understand a nation saying what defines a nation is its borders, and we have a right to think about how we want to address it.
Yeah.
That's fine. Going forward, perhaps be a little bit more, do a better job there. But I'm worried about how this mass immigration, how the people that they call illegals that are here are going to be treated. I'm not sure about that. So if you're asking me, okay, what would you say to them? I would say, the past is a past. What matters is today and tomorrow, right? So today and tomorrow, I would like to, if I was to advise them, if anybody there was to listen to me, I would say, for immigration going forward, the only sure way to tackle immigration is to help the nation of origins of the people immigrating, help those nations become wealthy and prosperous as well. That is the only way. So that's number one. And in order to help them become wealthy and prosperous, there's only one way. It's economic freedom. When I hear Elon complaining day and night about the regulations, he's seeing it in his industry. But we don't have to be into very pointy industries, very cutting edge industries. It's pretty much the baseline. It's whether you want to own a bakery or you want to start a private school. The regulations are everywhere in African nations, everywhere. I've been telling people for the longest time. So if America is serious about its immigration problem, it's going to have to be serious about doing everything possible so that today's poor nations can become prosperous nations. And my foreign policy advice to them would be to adopt something like prosperous cities to be their foreign policy. Because what the prosperous cities are, these are just next generation special economic zones that have their own law, have their own governance when it comes to business only. If we understand that poverty happens because if we understand that poverty is solved by prosperity is built by entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs need an enabling business environment to thrive, then you can understand why these zones become so important. And the reason why we go in a zone way is because, for good or for bad, whatever you think of the current environment, things have been built. Look around here. Even New York City, there's a lot of issues in the state of New York. There's tons of regulations that Elon could complain about. I would argue that it might be easier to, on a rather, an occupied plot of land, be able to create new rules when it comes to business and have that be a clean slate. And in a way, that's what I'm hearing them do or think about. They call it opportunity zones. Sometimes they call them freedom zones. But it's taking, the equivalency of 1% of federal land, and they're having a much better business environment than the rest of the United States is offering. Because you can imagine that by now there's so many entrenched interests in here. So I'm actually very curious to see how much Elon is really going to be able to cut in terms of our regulations. Because at some point he might realize you're cutting over here. Maybe he just cut his finger over there. Because everything is so entangled and so enmeshed, at some point it becomes hard to do it that way. You just really have to start over somewhere. And so for me, that's why I really would advise them to take the prosperous cities as their prosperity, as their foreign policy. And what that does is multiple things. Not only you are now doing a foreign policy that's really not based on how strong are you militarily. Because how sustainable is that? I'm not saying it's not important, but how sustainable is that and how far can it take you? I never like people who like to rely on people's fear of them to keep them in check. I like that maybe it's fear, fine, whatever, but I trust more having my interest enmeshed with yours
Yeah.
to keep the peace among ourselves. And so in this case, it would be so much better in my mind that you help other nations become prosperous by building together with them, by doing trade with them. And also what I love about that is it's no longer about the old patronizing model of we send you foreign aid. Our contribution to you is foreign aid, which is very patronizing, which is very much looking down on people, and which is very much not recognizing that we have the same capability as others to produce for ourselves given the right circumstances. So I think supporting something, having something like the prosperous cities be your foreign policy for Africa and the rest of the developing world, I would argue, you would be sending this very strong, you're not only going to make prosperity and innovation happen here and abroad, but on top of that, you're also building new friends, people with whom you're friends because you're trading, you're doing business together. And on top of that, people who then get to understand very viscerally very viscerally the virtues of free market capitalism. Why? Because that's exactly what they're doing. They're benefiting from it. No one has to even tell them what it is because they're living it. And so this is how I think, and this is where I would really strongly, strongly recommend to whichever administration, I don't care which administration you are, I would have advised this to the Democrats had they won as well, to really consider these zones, these prosperous city zones, as a foreign policy for America, for Africa by the Americans, and also for them to remember one thing. I don't know if people listening to this show know that by 2050, 1/4 of the world's population will be African. By 2100, it will be half of the world population that will be African. Now, think about, you are a Westerner from anywhere in the West, and especially in this case, the US. You're thinking we have to remain, economically vibrant and we have to remain economically vibrant. Then think about it. What will happen if you're trying to build yourself up, economically speaking, today, but meanwhile, you're not thinking about the long game? The long game where you have the youngest population in the world, in this case, African population, and you have created a vacuum in Africa, where right now, what Africans are going for is more of a Chinese ways of the CCP way. I shouldn't even say the Chinese way, but the CCP way and the Russia way, the Russian government way. This is what they're being in touch with, which is completely at the opposite of what we defend in these walls, the concept of freedom and liberty and economic freedom and, free market capitalism, all of that. That's really not what's defended by the other side. But while you're not paying attention to Africa, the poverty not only remains there, but you're having 1/4 of the world's population still living in poverty with ideologies a la Russia and a la Chinese CCP. Do you see the problem that's happening down the road? And then why should we not be thinking about this part of the battle, the long game part of a battle? And I'm really worried that Americans are not thinking about this. They just think Africa is this faraway place, but it's not.
Yeah.
So.
The Free Life, Portrait of an Artist is the new documentary by Free the People, the story of Cuban-born artist Carlos Luna, who fled socialism under Castro to find his free life in America. You can watch it exclusively at civil.com, civl.com, with a live premiere on December 1st and available throughout the month of December for free at civil.com. Check it out. This reminds me of the last conversation which we had was at least a year ago, and Elizabeth Warren had gone after Prospera in Honduras.
Yes.
And my sense generally is that the Biden administration had a very hostile attitude towards these opportunity zones. And what the Trump administration could do is take a fundamentally different point of view and ask the question that you're asking, which is, why do families from Honduras risk everything, their lives and everything, and uproot their families and walk to the southern border. Instead of just focusing on the border, maybe we could become better trading partners. Maybe we could at least have an administration that doesn't try to punish people that are trying to create prosperity. So you're not talking about doubling down on the poverty industrial complex.
Absolutely not. If anything, I'm talking about finally leaving poverty behind. Because, I think also for the longest time, the solution to poverty, when you look at the American, development philosophy, it's been very much about, and the UN, surely, it's all about poverty alleviation. Where, Matt, do you see prosperity? They don't talk of prosperity. They talk about poverty alleviation.
Yeah.
That's all they talk about. But I'm sorry, that's not going to cut it anymore. I mean, the people in those countries, they have needs, just like people here. And now they have also the these little computers on their hands and these phones, and they get to see what the rest of the world looks like. And even the mainstream media propaganda that might have kept them under control for a long time because we're not really showing them what is possible in other parts of the world, forget all of that. With X, with the social media, TikTok, whatever, people are seeing other things in there, and they're just thinking to themselves, what? And it's not making any sense. And so my point is we need to stop with this attitude towards economic development to be just based on poverty alleviation. So to me, it's like, forget even just like, aid. It's just prosperity has to be the name of the game right now. It's got to be the name of the game.
So you've tweeted about your good friend Justin Trudeau, and I had not seen that speech until you shared it, but underlying this entire attitude, it's more than paternalistic. It's so patronizing. It really comes off as racist. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're good enough, and Canadians have this moral responsibility to go help Africa because surely they can't do it on their own.
No.
And young Africans see this, and are they offended? Like, what's their reaction to that sort of, this whiny white man from Canada telling them that they can't do it on their own?
Oh, Africans definitely despise these type of messages. Whether it's coming from Macron in France, it's coming from Trudeau in Canada, we definitely have a hard time about it.
And maybe it's the French stuff.
It's the French. I'm telling you, it's all linked. Yes. So no, we definitely have no patience for it. I think there is a very strong sense among Africans across the continent to want to build Africa up for Africa by Africans. Very much. This is a very strong sentiment across pretty much anybody that I can see on the continent. And we might disagree among ourselves as to how we might want to go about it. But as a whole, this is a very shared sentiment for the most part, up and down and left to right on the continent, for sure. So this type of conversation, I think these guys just don't get it. And also for me, when I hear Justin Trudeau, you have to understand, because here he is saying, oh, it is a responsibility of Canada to help African youth. And we're like, it's not your responsibility. We are not your responsibility. A child is under the responsibility of a parent. We're not your child. We're not. And
it's almost like an ethical colonialism, right?
Something along those lines.
Yeah. What is it? It's strange.
I think it goes back to this concept of almost, if you colonized a people, you probably think that you might not think much of them, because otherwise, in a way, you conquered them. You conquered them. So you're clearly, for whatever reason, you're considering yourself to be the smarter one, probably. And so I don't know if some of that is not still following us in, some psyches, and it runs pretty deep and pretty wide in people who sometimes might not even be acknowledging it. I don't know what's going on in Trudeau's brain, but it's very telling to me when he says it's a responsibility. When any nation says it's their responsibility to get us to this or to that or this or that, you're telling me right away, you look at me as a child, although I'm an adult, but as a child, and somehow you have not internalized that I can do it on my own as well. So now what makes you feel this way? I can only think about perhaps, the history between the two nations, in this case, Canada and African nations, and some of the history of colonialism, not necessarily by Canada, but, we've been colonized. Most African nations have been colonized. And I think many people, for them, the way they connect, the way they do the equation is, only inferior people get colonized. That's why they get colonized. And somehow I don't know if it follows you. But in the case of Trudeau, I think the reason why I got really annoyed by people like him and people like Macron opening their big mouths and talking about how we're going to, make it happen for Africa, it's a patronizing part, of course. But in the case of Trudeau, I'm just like, have you seen your country?
Yeah.
I mean, the GDP of Canada is going down. I think it's gone down $4,000. It's crazy. And so for him, and we know that he knows nothing about what it takes to build prosperity. He doesn't. Look at Canada. And so for him to have the nerves to say, we're gonna help you, I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. And so Trudeau he's been problematic as far as I'm concerned. So for me, when I see incapable people thinking that they can give us advice or tell us what to do, I've got a real problem. And I don't know if they're... Yeah, you don't want me to say that. But
yeah. But well, there's we're talking about the Vice President-elect J.D. Vance before we started talking. And I think what you're laying out is an interesting, essentially a foreign policy proposal that the U.S. should care about what's happening in Africa. We should care about what China's trying to do. We should care what Russia's trying to do. But this isn't, we're not cutting more government checks, and we're not looking to tell them how to live their lives. But
exactly.
Maybe we could do business.
Exactly. And then I think at that point, because you see, this is where China is in a way winning, they're in Africa. They're winning because on the surface, Africans are like, well, at least they're doing business with us. They're building our ports, our airports and all that. Yeah, except that they're going to come back and take those organs. I call it ports, airports, organs, right? Because we're taking these loans to get these built by them, which most of us will not be able to pay back. And why can't we never pay it back? Because you can't pay it back unless and until you put in place the conditions so that your wealth creators can create wealth. And from that wealth that they created, some of it, the government gets it, I know some of the hardcore ANCAP people are going to be mad at me for saying, from some of that prosperity we built, that's how we pay some of these loans that we got from, the Chinese in this case. But if you take loans and if you take money and you don't put that money to work to be productive, it's just, this is not an investment. This is expenditure. And that's what's happening for us. So, and I think in our case, for as long as so the Chinese look like they're working with us well. Why? Because from the standpoint of our leaders, they like working with the Chinese. Because the Chinese tell them, look, the CCP tells them, I don't care how nasty you can be to your people. I don't care how corrupt you might be. Let's do business. But the business in this case is not business that really matters. It's not business that where the little ordinary African can see themselves in. Because it's business, government to government deals, right? Yeah. So I'm going to build a port. I'm going to build an airport. Yeah, it's true. It's nice to have better roads. It's nice to have better airports for those of us who can afford to even travel on a plane. But at the end of the day, what's in it for me? Oh, and by the way, I'm paying you with my natural resources. Right? And so in a deal like that, it's between, like you said, it's government to government. The ordinary Africans doesn't win jack. So right now, what it is the French are doing deals with us where as long as my multinationals get as much of the pie, we're fine. And we will close our eyes on all this other stuff you do. We help you stay in power. That's the deal. So it's another deal, government to government, right? Where the French government is negotiating a lot for their multinational. For
all crony is all corruption.
All crony is all corruption. So in this deal, the ordinary African, what's in it there for them?
Yeah.
Nothing. But Chinese show up and say, the CCP shows up and say, I am going to build your ports and your airports and all of that stuff. You give me your what do you call it? Give me your natural. I'll go to that in a minute. So I'll build your port, your airports, all of that. Yeah, roads, nicer, blah, blah. But the ordinary African, what's in them? Nothing. The Russian shows up and says, and I will protect you against your own, police and military in case they want to have a putsch on, do a putsch on you. Will protect your own physical integrity. You, the leader. And I'll help myself with your natural resources. As a matter of fact, all of these people help themselves with the natural resources. So these are the deals. One says, I bring you protection against your own people, the Russians primarily. One says, I will build all of these infrastructure that you were supposed to build, but you cannot build because you don't have enough money to do it. And, that's the Chinese, the CCP. And I don't care what you are, whatever. We don't want to, no questions asked. Let's just do deals. And the Chinese, the French are there, old ways, still doing what they're doing. Meanwhile, the African ordinary person sees nothing in these deals. Now imagine what would happen if the Americans could show up now and be the only ones who actually do deals with the locals, with the ordinary African, doing business with them, eye to eye, investing in African businesses, being able to hire African employees, and for African employers to be able to hire, American employees all the way in Africa. And we're doing building this beautiful tapestry that only commerce, free trade can build. Can you imagine now who is going to be the winner in this? It's going to be the Americans, of course, but also the ordinary African people. And this is the deal I'm proposing to put on the table. No one else is doing it right now. Everyone is winning on their own terms in Africa, and the Africans are basically taking the crumbs. It's about time that stops. And the way we do, and whoever is going to show that type of leadership is going to win in the hearts and minds of Africans for generations to come. Because that's what happens when you work with people to enrich yourselves and to have a win-win-win situation. So this is not about America helping Africa. It's not about it's not about America helping Africa. It's about Americans working together with the Africans, treating them the same exact way they treat their best trade partners. And I'm telling you, that's going to have a lot of impact. And so that's what's on the table right now. And I'm just not sure if this administration is going to see it. But I'm going to try to make sure they see it. Just like I would have tried to make sure if it was a democratic, government, that they see that as well. So this is something, by the way, that no matter who goes back and forth in office, it should no longer matter that you're a Democrat or a Republican, that you should think that this is a good idea.
Yeah.
This is a good idea.
The potential is there. I try to be optimistic at the beginning of every new administration, but I think J.D. Vance might, in fact, appreciate the analogy from his upbringing in Appalachia and the poverty and the soft bigotry of treating
the poor
people different.
Yes.
And of course, Trump just likes deals. He's a deal maker.
Listen, I think at the end of the day, people don't like, it doesn't matter who you are. Most normal people I know, no one likes to be patronized. No one likes to be told what to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how poor you are. It doesn't matter how uneducated you are. It doesn't matter. People like to leave people alone. Nobody wants to be patronized. And Africans surely do not like to be patronized. So that's why, for me, the best way you can engage with someone is to do deals with each other. And also, when you do deal with each other, when you start to work with one another, that's also when you learn from each other's culture way more. There are things that just start to happen. That mixicity that start to happen, but only can happen when people come together and are exchanging value for value. That's the other part that I'm also looking forward to seeing. I'm looking forward to Americans understanding different African nations and cultures better. I'm looking forward to African people also understanding Americans better. I really would love to see that relationship, blossom. But the only way it can happen in the way I want it is if we come together to do business together. To me, that's the only foreign policy that I would like to see happen. But I would like to see happen. That's it. We don't need anything else in my mind.
Regular viewers of Kibbe on Liberty already know how obsessed I have been with the pandemic industrial complex and all of the stupid, authoritarian, and downright evil things that the government did to us during COVID-19. Well, I'm proud to announce a new investigative series that looks to get to the bottom of all of that. It's called The Cover-Up, and I'm producing it in cooperation with BlazeTV. The only place you're going to see this is BlazeTV, so go to FauciCoverup.com/Kibbe and use the code FauciLied for $30 off your annual subscription. Do it now. The truth is out there.
You obviously are an advocate for this. You're one of the strongest voices on this recommendation, but you also happen to be a businesswoman who's not just talking the talk. You're demonstrating how a business partnership in Senegal, where you come from, is possible.
Absolutely. And this is another thing too. No matter what they do, I hear Tom talk about tariffs and all of that stuff. I really hope that they're going to be smart enough, especially in the case of Africa, to not touch AGOA, the African Growth Opportunity Act. Under this act that President Bush had put in place a couple decades ago, they made it that many finished African products that were primarily made in Africa get to come into this country free of tariff, which helps us, remain competitive, especially given all the nonsense we had to deal with back home. So I know many African people that I know to whom I've been talking about AGOA for years. That's where the first worry. When they hear Trump talking about tariffs and they're like, my God, is he going to touch the AGOA? I tell them, I don't know. But if any of his people hear what we're talking about, they should understand that AGOA should be the last thing that they should touch. But if anything, be inspired by it, double down on it, while, really supporting projects that are creating the environment for business and wealth creators to create wealth in these countries. I mean, America only has to win, because imagine 54 nations right now with whom, that represent a double-digit percentage of a world trade. This is insane. The waste that's going on, it's so insane. Americans should think, what would happen if, look at the whole continent. The whole continent, forget the EU. We're like 1.3 billion people right now. By 2050, we're going to be 2.5 billion people. Imagine that many people now that are real customers because they were able to achieve prosperity. Who needs China at that point? Especially with a population that's going way down. Who does? And so there's just so much at stake here that I'm just like, guys, let us be smart. And let us just stop focusing only about what's in front of us. So whichever, government that you are saying, we have to go and fight with China, and we're going to fight on this tariff, you're saying you're doing this. You're saying that you're in a battle with China, and yet there is that continent over there that you decide to completely neglect and ignore. You cannot be serious to me. You cannot. You just cannot. And I'm not your big geopolitical person, but I know enough to know that this is the most stupid, behavior one can have. It's almost like I'm saying, oh yeah, I'm going out and then, like I wear this dress, the front is covered, but there's no back. Think about how stupid that is, right? My ass is way dangling in the back. Everybody can, I'm completely vulnerable from there. But, it's okay because you know what? I took care of this. That's right now what I'm seeing.
So by the way, I like framing this as almost a foreign policy question, because I think if they want to, quote, go to war with China, they do it by exporting the model that we're actually known for. We once were the capitalists.
That's right, and create new allies and people who understand and embrace capitalism because they have seen what it does for them. They would have seen, wow, we went from being dirt poor, the poorest region in the world, to one of the most thriving regions in the world. And we did it We know how it happened. And in the process also, we're going to have this conversation, make sure people understand none of this happened in a vacuum. That's why also I love these prosperous cities, because the fact that we have to put prosperous cities into countries. When I go to a country and I'm selling a prosperous city to an African leader, I have to explain all of these things, why this would be necessary. And that's when they get to even see, oh, wow, so the business environment does actually matter more than I thought. They get to understand all of these things. And also us, because you don't want these projects to feel like impositions on the people. So you also have a big job of awareness building to do. People have to understand why these cities, why these zones, what differentiates them from other regular zones that they might be more used to. Why does it matter? What's the role of all of it? And in doing all of that, having to tell people, because you are wanting to get their buy-in. You want them to be like, oh, I get it. Yeah. And yeah, it makes sense. I'm on board. So just having to do that homework, it's a job of educating people on a lot of these ideas without being, too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And then they get to see the results, and then quickly they tie it up. Free market capitalism, wow, the result is this. And that's going to be, imagine now when the Chinese or the CCP is going to show up, or Russia with all of their, ideas, and then Africans will be like, sorry. And then, we're partners. So now all of a sudden America has this many more countries. We have 54 nations on the continent. Even if not all of them do it, even if it's only the sub-Saharan African nations, we are the majority, it's a lot of new allies to build.
Yeah. So I saw that you're organizing a Bitcoin conference through Prospera Africa. And one of the tipping points, I believe, in Trump's campaign was his successful, basically cut a deal with the tech bros. Not actually starting with Elon, but obviously Elon's the biggest name in that community. Vivek Ramaswamy, David Sachs, like the list goes on and on and on. And Trump said, we're going to stop central bank digital currency, which is basically the Chinese central credit system model. And we're going to free up cryptocurrency. We're not going to destroy it the way that Elizabeth Warren wants to do that. I think the tech bros get your argument instinctually.
They do. So, and by the way, it's my friend Farida that's organizing Africa Bitcoin Conference in Kenya, but I'm going and I'm speaking there. But so, of course, they would understand it. If anybody who is into the crypto world, who's been attracted to the crypto world, understand. I mean, they can. It's easy for them to understand the issues of governance or lack of it, and so for them it's a natural, because it's the product. Crypto comes from a desire, for greater freedom and independence from the state, and also in the case of Bitcoin, people who are very serious about the concept of sound money, right? Now, where sometimes I pick my battles with the Bitcoin world especially is, while I'm definitely on the Bitcoin camp, I'm not crypto, I'm Bitcoin, right? For me, there's Bitcoin and there's crypto.
Apparently, we have to choose teams, right?
You don't have to, but based on my, by now and based on what I know and I keep learning, I see that difference. Mm-hmm. Now, the issue that I have with my beloved Bitcoiners, I really love them, but the issue that I have is when they say Bitcoin fixes everything. And it's funny because we've been having these arguments with some of them, and they're just like, but my guy, once you get sound money, everything else falls into place. The government just doesn't have access to, doesn't kind of do this, kind of do that anymore. And I'm like, you can have Bitcoin all you want, but if I'm still in a living and having to do business in an environment where all the rules otherwise are messed up, money can only get you so far. Money is a tool at the end of the day. It's a tool for trade, right? And so I understand what they're trying to say, that unsound money goes very deep into building bad incentives. I get all of that part, but I'm still not in the camp of Bitcoin fixes everything.
Yeah. It's not like magic.
It's not like magic.
And it's like push-pull. Like, you got to have both. You got to have the rule of law. You have to have...
That's the thing.
Institutions that function.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like to tell them that Bitcoin is a tool in the entrepreneur's toolkit.
Yeah.
And the full bag of entrepreneur's toolkit is like what you said. It has rule of law. It has clear and transferable property rights. all of that good stuff. And yes, sound money is part of it. It's one of the pebbles in that bag. It's an important one, but it's just one of the key elements that need to come together for you to now have something meaningful that you can build from. And one of my greatest achievement on that one is, I remember my first Bitcoin Africa. I gave a talk, and I was being interviewed. We're doing a fireside chat with this gentleman, and he was working in Washington, D.C., at a think tank, I think, working on policy reforms, but only specifically focused on Bitcoin. So when I met him, I think he was very much still thinking Bitcoin fixes it. And he told me, he said, "Magatte, I was in that position." And he said, "And I heard you talk," because I was telling them, during that talk, I was telling them, no, we shouldn't think that Bitcoin fixes everything. It's just, it's not, it doesn't. And he said he didn't understand right away everything I was trying to say. But eventually a year or so later, as we came out and talking more about Prosper, he's like, once I saw it, I could never see it again. And I'm sorry, but Bitcoin doesn't fix all of it. It's a very important tool, don't take me wrong. But he's like, but the foundational layer is that regulatory, framework, without which it's going to be really hard for us humans to build pretty much anything.
And to take it full circle, if you're America first, and you want to secure the border, you need to think about what's happening on the other side of the border.
That's the only way.
And you can do both at the same time.
That's right.
But like if you're just focused on the border, you're going to lose the battle.
Like I said, think about my dress. I'm going out and I think everything is great because I took care of this. Meanwhile, again, my ass is out there dangling for all to see. And yeah, what could go wrong with that picture? What could go wrong? I'm asking you.
So I am being lobbied by other people to make sure that I'm in Nairobi.
Nairobi. I think you should.
When is the Atlas Network?
Atlas Network. Oh shoot, I don't remember the dates. I should, but
I'll
Nairobi
tweet
for
it out
sure.
afterwards.
I think they. I just took notice of the new dates. I should remember the dates.
Linda was lobbying me, and you may remember we made this video that she stars in. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago now in South Africa, and now they're all grown up, and the liberty movement in Africa has become
growing.
This big beautiful thing.
That's totally right.
So yes, we're going to try to go, and I look forward to telling that story.
Yes,
if we can.
Yes, and I think when you come also, especially this Gen Z across the continent are pretty amazing. I don't know if you've been following what's been going on in Kenya. But Gen Z is not having any of it. And what I love about Gen Z is so perfect for free market capitalism. Because naturally, they don't want to wait for anybody to do anything for them. They're just like, look, we want everything we see. Yeah. We want all of this. And we're not going to wait. And we're just going to get it done. And so they have a right attitude. Imagine what would happen if these people had the right environment. I mean, it would be game over. The world will see something that they've never imagined before possible. And it is at our fingertips. So I'm looking forward to when you come to Nairobi next year in 2025 for the Africa Liberty Forum, that you'll get a chance to hear so many more of these stories. Even we'll try to see if we can get you some Bitcoiners in there as well. Because even when it comes to Bitcoin, so while in the West they talk, Bitcoin is more or less a speculative asset. And otherwise, people like to talk about the principles behind Bitcoin and all of that stuff. It's funny because the one place in the world where people use Bitcoin for what it's really supposed to be, which is hard, sound money, it's Africa. An African doesn't need, you go to the barber and it's like, people are paying and being paid in Bitcoin. We have completely leapfrogged ahead. Just like for many Africans, we never knew the landlines. We went straight from landline to cell phones everywhere. Same thing with even some of our payment system. We went to digital money. We were one of the
So no more wheelbarrows of currency?
No, and that's why. That's exactly the reason why we were early adopters.
Yeah.
Africa is a region of the world with the highest rate of adoption and fastest rate of adoption of Bitcoin. because
the government currency was worthless.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we use it just like we don't, no need for explanation. People just use it over here. They're like, oh, what's that thing? Really? Yeah, you can do that because you have PayPal, you have Zelle, you have bank account, wiring, and you have all types of things. And you're like, what's this thing? But when you're not able to move money freely and cheaply and quickly, all of a sudden, Bitcoin makes a lot of sense.
It all goes together. So when people are not watching you on Lex Friedman or Jordan Peterson, where do we find Magatte Wade?
Very easy. Everywhere on social media, you can find me. My handle is Magatte W, MAGATTEW, everywhere. If not, if you forget, just go to Magatte Wade, my website.com. So MagatteWade.com.
And you were one of the stars in a new movie.
Oh, well, I don't know about the stars. I think these other two ladies are really wonderful. They do. Yes, there's a new movie called She Rises Up. And I would also recommend that the current administration, before they leave, watches it for when they want to come back. And for the upcoming administration to also watch it. Because like I said, this concept of economic freedom and needing to build prosperity in poor nations, it's something that I think any normal human being should be able to rally around, regardless of whether you have a little R, little L, or little R or D or something else, or L next to your name. It doesn't matter who you are. By now, we should have a consensus on that, the fact that it is a good idea to build prosperity in as many countries as we know. And that the only way to build prosperity is through economic freedom. So the movie She Rises Up follows the life of three women entrepreneurs from the developing nations. So then there's me, there's a lady from Peru and another one from Sri Lanka. And we're small and medium-sized enterprises, some bigger than others, but we all share the same boat. And the movie is designed so that we get to show people rather than tell them. Hopefully they get to walk a mile in our shoes, share our family, our family context. Our employees also do the same. People share what a job really means for them, jobs that come from businesses that need better business environment. So the movie is about that. And that's why, again, I would like to make sure that everybody gets to see it and that we all try and rally around that very simple yet most powerful idea that there is nothing better and there's no more peace building block than prosperity building. And the more nations will be prosperous and the more peace we will have. I really believe it. And I think this is where America can take really a serious lead. This, to me, would be a whole new, fresh way to look at America's role in the world. America has a big role to play in the world. And it's not a role of being a parent to anybody, or be the policeman or lady of the world, but it is about we understand what it takes to build prosperity, and our only job is to make sure that we support it anywhere where people are saying we want to be prosperous, and then let everything happen on its own. I think it would be really refreshing to see that happen. I heard J.D. Vance talk about, we should, foreign policy should not rely so heavily anymore on strong army, but rather, on doing trade with one another. Now it's their time and opportunity now to prove it. And I believe that anyone who is going to do it is definitely going to gain the moral high ground, because that is what it is to be morally responsible to support such initiatives. So let us see what they're made of. I hear a lot of words and it all sounds nice, but me, that's how I will judge American foreign policy. Will they support the creation of these zones?
All right. So we have some work to do.
We have some work to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.